She offended a regular customer, unaware that he was the owner of the establishment, and moreover, it was Clint Eastwood. The bright midday sun streamed through the large windows of Sierra Grill, a modest but lively restaurant in Carmel by the Sea, California. It wasn't an expensive place, but it had its own charm, a little rustic, a little modern, just the kind of spot the locals loved, especially on a warm Thursday. For Megan, a 23-year-old waitress trying to make ends meet, the charm of the restaurant couldn't overshadow her frustration. Her shift started as chaos from the very first moment. "Table 7 needs a refill," one of the servers shouted. Megan didn't even look up, quickly jotting down a new order in her notepad. Her ponytail swung as she dashed between tables, balancing complaints about undercooked steaks, split checks, and forgotten drinks. As if that wasn't enough, in the past hour, she had encountered 3 rude customers, each leaving her only a couple of coins. And just as she was nearing her limit, an elderly man entered and quietly sat at a corner table. He looked like someone who didn't care much about appearances, a slightly wrinkled flannel shirt, faded jeans, and an old Stetson hat resting on the table. His boots looked like they had walked through dirty roads for decades. Megan glanced at him out of the corner of her eye, the corner of her mouth curling into a smirk. "Great," she muttered under her breath. "Probably going to order coffee and leave me $1 for a tip." But she couldn't ignore him forever. Her colleague rushed up and whispered, "You need to take care of table 12. Megan sighed and grabbed her notepad, forcing a practiced smile as she approached the man. "What can I get you?" she asked, trying to hold back her impatience. The man looked up and studied her face intently. For a moment, she thought he looked familiar, but she couldn't place where she had seen him before. "A burger," he replied calmly. His voice was low and raspy, with a tone that commanded attention. "A burger, got it. Anything else?" Megan asked, tapping her pen on the notepad. "No, ma'am," he answered, slightly tipping his hat. Megan rolled her eyes as she turned back to the kitchen. "Ma'am," she muttered, barely holding back her annoyance, but as she entered the kitchen, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this man. He wasn't like the other customers, rude, demanding, or indifferent. There was a quiet confidence about him, as if he was expecting something. But she decided not to dwell on it. It was just another table, another order, and another $1. Little did she know how wrong she was. Megan returned to table 12 with the man's burger. A few minutes later, the plate landed with a clatter on the table, though she usually prided herself on being more careful. She was on the edge of exhaustion, her smile more strained than sincere. The man didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't show it. "Here you go," she said, brushing a stray hair from her face and placing the ketchup bottle next to his plate. "Anything else?" she asked. He glanced at the burger, then back at her. "No, this is perfect. Thank you." His words were polite, but there was a subtle confidence in his tone that made Megan feel awkward. She couldn't understand why she couldn't just walk away and take care of the next table. Maybe it was because of his calm demeanor, that unshakable confidence that no one else in the restaurant seemed to have. Everyone else was either complaining, running around, or looking frazzled, while this man sat and quietly ate his burger. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked, leaning on the edge of the table. Instantly, she regretted the question, but she couldn't stop herself. "No," he replied, calmly cutting his burger in half. Megan smiled. "I thought you weren't from around here," she said. "The hat kind of gives it away, like you just stepped off a set of an old western." The man smiled slightly but didn't seem irritated. That only irritated Megan even more. She was tired of having to be polite. "You know," she continued, "locals usually don't look like they just came from a ranch." He didn't respond right away, taking a couple of confident bites of his burger before saying, "Guess I'm not like everyone else." That simple, yet confident statement made Megan feel a brief moment of shame, but she quickly pushed it away. "Enjoy your meal," she said, stepping back from the table. But as she passed other tables, she noticed that the man was watching her. It wasn't an uncomfortable gaze, but it was evaluative. And for some reason, that feeling made her uneasy. Fortunately, the lunchtime rush started to die down and the restaurant grew quieter. Megan was finally able to take a break. She leaned on the bar counter, scrolling through her phone while keeping an eye on the tables. Her gaze fell on table 12, where the man was still leisurely finishing his burger. He wasn't in any hurry, sipping water slowly and looking around with a kind of calm curiosity. "Hey, Megan," her colleague Danny called as he walked by. "Isn't it weird that this guy is so calm, like none of this even matters to him?" Megan shrugged. "Well, I guess some people have time to take their time." Danny chuckled. "Maybe he's famous or something. Haven't you noticed how familiar he looks?" Megan rolled her eyes. "Famous? Well, sure, if he's famous, then I'm the Queen of England." Danny raised an eyebrow but didn't continue. Megan wasn't in the mood for small talk, especially since she wasn't feeling very upbeat that day. She grabbed the check for table 12 and walked over to the man, deciding to finish this with minimal conversation. "Here's your check," she said, placing it on the table with a faint smile. "Whenever you're ready." The man glanced at the check but didn't immediately take it. Instead, he looked back at her, his sharp eyes meeting hers. "Do you like your job?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The question caught Megan off guard. She slowed her pace, her smile fading slightly. "Yeah, it's fine," she replied, shrugging. "It's work, you know." He nodded slightly, his expression unreadable. "Work is what you make of it," he said after a moment. "But it's clear you're a little tense today." Megan felt her cheeks flush. Who was he to comment on her mood? She crossed her arms, feeling her patience wearing thin. "Look, it's been a rough day, okay? Not everyone can sit around eating burgers and giving advice," she snapped. To her surprise, the man didn't take offense. He leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "Fair enough," he said. "But sometimes how you treat people in moments like this says more about you than you think." Megan felt a flash of anger in her chest. Was he trying to teach her a lesson? She had already opened her mouth to argue, but the man stood up, took out his wallet, and laid several bills on the table. "I'll leave this for you to think about," he said, walking toward the door. "Thanks for the meal." He was already at the exit when something strange happened. The manager, a stern woman named Carol, rushed out from the office, and her face lit up when she saw the man. She approached him with outstretched hand and said respectfully, "Mr. Eastwood, didn't expect to see you today." Megan froze. Her heart sank as she mentally repeated the name Eastwood, Clint Eastwood. She immediately turned her head to the door and saw him briefly turn around to shake Carol's hand. In that moment, their eyes met, and there was a brief understanding between them. The man left the restaurant, and Megan stood there, stunned. She had just been rude not to some random customer, but to the owner of the restaurant, none other than Clint Eastwood. Megan stood frozen, gripping her notepad. She kept staring at the door through which Clint Eastwood had just exited, unable to believe that she had just brushed off Clint Eastwood himself. Carol, in the meantime, turned to her and excitedly said, "Can you believe Mr. Eastwood came in today? He's been so busy lately, I haven't seen him in a week." Megan nodded, trying to hide her embarrassment. Carol continued, not noticing the change in Megan's expression. "You know, this restaurant is like his baby. Every little detail is under his personal control. We always remind the staff to be on top of things, because you never know when he'll pop in." Megan felt the air in the room tighten. She began mentally replaying every word she had said, every rude remark and rolled eye. The shame hit her hard. "Are you okay?" Danny asked, noticing how pale Megan had become. I need a minute," she barely whispered, slipping into the break room. As soon as the door closed behind her, Megan exhaled and sat down on a chair, feeling an overwhelming rush of shame. How could she have been so inattentive? She had worked at Sierra Grill for 2 years and had never paid attention to the rumors about the mysterious owner. If she had known anything, maybe she would have recognized him or at least thought twice before speaking her mind. Her thoughts were a mess, but one thought kept coming back. Now what? Megan didn't know what to do. The next day, when she came to work, her stomach twisted with anxiety. She hadn't slept well, replaying the events from the day before. Every time she thought of Clint Eastwood's calm, confident gaze, something inside her twisted. What if he told Carol about her behavior? What if she lost her job? It wouldn't be easy to find another one, especially with rent due in 2 weeks and student loans mounting every month. At the start of her shift, Megan tried to avoid Carol's gaze, doing her best to please the customers. She smiled, apologized, and refilled drinks before anyone had to ask. It was the only time in a while that she gave her all to her work. When the lunch rush hit, the restaurant filled with activity again. Megan was wiping a table when she heard that familiar voice she couldn't forget. "Well, looks like you're busy," said Clint Eastwood, standing by the counter, his hands calmly resting in his pockets. He was dressed the same as last time, but now his presence seemed even more imposing. Megan felt her heart skip a few beats. She nervously smiled, trying to say something. Mr. Eastwood, hi, I didn't know you'd be back so soon." He tilted his head slightly, his face remaining calm and impassive. "I like to check in on my establishments from time to time," he replied. "It helps keep everyone on their toes." Megan felt her palms start to sweat. She nervously swallowed. "Well, everything is going great," she said. He nodded slightly, looking around the restaurant. "I can see that, but you're a bit tense," he added. Megan froze. Of course, he noticed. He had probably noticed everything. He raised his hand, cutting off her attempt to apologize. "No need to apologize," he said calmly. "I'm not here to make your life harder." Megan looked at him in surprise. "No?" she weakly asked. He answered gently, "No. But I think there's a lesson here. You never know who you're talking to and what they're going through. A little kindness can go a long way." Megan felt her cheeks flush. She didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded, trying to hold back her emotions. "I've had my tough days too," he continued, softer now. "But how you handle moments like these says a lot about you. And trust me, people notice." Megan felt her face grow even redder. His words weren't harsh, but they had a greater impact than any reprimand. He wasn't trying to humiliate her, he just wanted to teach her something important. "Thank you," she said quietly, offering a faint smile. "Thank you," he repeated. "Remember, every interaction is an opportunity. Use it wisely." With those words, he took off his hat and left, leaving Megan standing there in deep thought, overwhelmed with emotions. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark, a desire to become better. Over the next few weeks, Megan's attitude shifted. She worked harder, smiled more often, and tried to be kinder to everyone, even when they didn't deserve it. And as it turned out, Clint Eastwood wasn't just a customer, he was the key to her personal transformation.